Hello, everyone, and welcome to Avoiding Growing Pains in the Federal Market. My name is Shirley Collier. I am the president and founder of Scale to Market. I'm a technology entrepreneur, speaker, author, business growth consultant, and executive mentor specializing in federal business development. My colleague and co-presenter today is Kelly Mitchell, founder and principal of Impact HR. Kelly is a human resources professional with more than 20 years of experience providing expertise and services to an array of fast growth organizations around the country.
Hello, everyone.
We are broadcasting from the greater Washington, D.C. area and welcome our listeners from around the country. This is a live webinar. We have attempted to mute attendees so that background noises can be kept to a minimum, but we ask that you mute your phones as well. Because we have people attending this as both a live webinar and is being recorded for availability on demand, we ask that you send your questions in by email. Please send them to questions@scaletomarket.com. We will distribute a link to our slides and to the recording after we finish the live webinar. So today's discussion is a unique interdisciplinary perspective on business development, human capital, and compliance. We take this approach because in small businesses, executives wear multiple hats and must be keenly aware of how issues impact the entire organization, not just one functional area, division, or location. Kelly and I are both entrepreneurs and small business owners and understand the risks, challenges, and rewards that come with owning and growing a business of your own. I will first give you context for our discussion today and describe how business development practices can help you avoid growing pains. Kelly will then describe HR compliance issues that can challenge small federal contractors as they grow. We hope to take a few minutes at the end to address your questions. Again, please email them to questions@scaletomarket.com. So let's get started. Today's webinar is one of a series of programs that brings together the federal marketplace's best minds in business development, marketing, law, accounting, finance, data analytics, and human resources to share insights and inspiration. These webinars are brief and content-rich, focused on what you need to know and do to grow your business. Today's topic is focused on avoiding growing pains with an emphasis on people. Growth Masters also refers to you, federal contracting CEOs, and your executive teams who are focused on profitable growth. We're beginning our discussion with a look at 4 business development practices that promote growth and help you avoid common growing pains. The first is to develop a BD playbook. I sometimes call this a framework or a strategy. The point is you need a plan. Many small businesses get their first contract because of a relationship they have, either with a prime contractor, an agency, or a contracting officer. They get very excited and focus on hiring people and fulfilling the contract. But it is really hard to stop and take a global view of the federal marketplace, determine which other agencies have a need for your service, what your differentiators are compared to your competitors, and how you need to team to win additional contracts over the life of your company. Many small businesses assume their work will speak for itself or that the client likes them, which will result in new contracts. And for some small businesses, they assume that all bidders have an equal chance of being selected, and nothing could be further from the truth. Federal decision makers are constantly seeking vendor and product information prior to and during the proposal evaluation process. Their assessment is made on an accumulation of information gathered over a long period of time, not just during the proposal review process. If your company is not playing the right game, like shaping upcoming procurements on an ongoing basis, your chances of winning a contract are slim. Just responding to public solicitations gives you at best a 10% win rate because you're competing against companies that have been educating and developing relationships with decision makers for months and in some cases years.
Hey, Shirley, let me ask you a question. Does the BD playbook also describe the roles and responsibilities of the staff?
Yes. A good BD playbook or framework also describes your approach to and who will be conducting ongoing market research and analysis and performing marketing communications within your company. Business development consists of your sales and your marketing efforts. A common pitfall that I see is expecting your salespeople, who should be in face-to-face meetings, to monitor upcoming solicitations or send out newsletters or tweet or update the website. A best practice is to let your salespeople focus on external matters like developing relationships, and for a good marketing specialist to focus on internal matters like communicating your value proposition year-round to key decision makers and influencers. That also is an important element of the BD plan. A good BD playbook sets priorities and goals for the sales staff and determines the metrics of progress towards milestones and ultimate goals. And the biggest issue I see my clients struggle with is only measuring contract wins to determine the success of salespeople. Because of the long procurement cycle, which can be years, determining the steps and timing of milestones along the path is critical. You don't want to assume everything is going along fine, only to determine 2 years down the road that your company doesn't even qualify to bid on a procurement you've been tracking and investing in all along. Another trap that small business CEOs fall into is trying to do everything or having everyone in the company report to them directly. The second of the 4 best business development practices is to delegate. There's a paradigm proffered by Noam Wasserman, a former Harvard professor and author of The Founder's Dilemma. And the paradigm is, do you want to be king or rich? If you are king or queen, you can control everything, which is attractive to a lot of entrepreneurs. But if you want to grow your company and get rich, you must learn to build infrastructure, including an executive team that is empowered to act.
Hey, Shirley, I see this all the time in my practice. You know, it's easy to talk about delegation, but very hard to execute. What do you think is the most important thing that CEOs must do to get that ball rolling?
Well, Kelly, that brings us to the third area of business development practices that helps avoid growing pains, and that is articulating a clear vision for your company. And the reason this is so important is that it drives strategy, marketing, communications, and the type of people you will hire. A good vision also engenders trust, commitment, accountability, and ultimately results. Studies show that companies that have and execute a clear vision have lower turnover and more productive employees. People want to work for a company that is going places and where they know that their work is meaningful and impactful. Leadership effectiveness is the single greatest factor that drives employee commitment, and it is the foundation upon which delegation and growth occurs. The last area of BD practices that promotes profitable growth and avoids growing pains is continuous evaluation of your strategy, assumptions, and return on investment. This should be done at least every 18 months. So this BD playbook or framework we've been talking about needs to be evaluated. It won't last forever. Procurement cycles in the federal market are long, but you should have some clear indications within 18 months that your thinking and approach are working. Success can be measured by contract wins, of course, but also progress towards milestones, as I mentioned earlier. And those milestones can be like getting a prime position on a GWAC or an IDIQ. Achievement of milestones lets you and your team know you are on the right path.
Shirley, you described the federal business development as a team sport. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So this infographic, recently published by Contract Management Magazine, although I know it's a little hard to read here, it captures the scope and breadth of individuals involved in a single federal procurement. It is estimated that for a typical $1 million contract, There are about 92 employees involved in some manner, and this excludes, and these are federal employees only, and this excludes the federal employees who oversee the actual delivery of products and services associated with the contract. And on the contractor side, there can be up to 25 people involved in proposing and contracting that same $1 million procurement, which also excludes the staff responsible for the delivery of the product or service. Business development in the federal marketplace is complex. It's hard, and it's highly regulated, as any new business development professional who invites a government employee to lunch will tell you. Something that is as common and accepted practice in the commercial place as going to lunch can be prohibited in the federal marketplace. And that is just the beginning of understanding regulations. Since we're talking about regulations, Kelly, what are the HR regulatory matters that can trip up small companies as they grow?
Well, thank you, Shirley. Yes, being a government contractor can be very challenging. Not only do the contractors have to be aware of and comply with the regulations that apply to them as an employer, but there are specific regulations that apply to them as contractors. And so as they grow, these regulations could get more complex. But let's start with some interesting facts about government contracting. The federal government awards more than $500 billion annually to contractors, and roughly 200,000 companies win these federal contracts annually. So there certainly are opportunities with the government, but as Shirley mentioned, getting the opportunities are complex and hard. But once the opportunities are won, it's very important to understand the complex world of regulations to ensure that you do not compromise those opportunities. Companies that have succeeded in winning government contracts know it requires discipline, again, as Shirley indicated, but also diligence. So ultimately, it's not about getting new contracts, but keeping those contracts by adhering closely to the array of federal rules and regulations. Because of the timing of today's webinar, I will be focusing on a few major regulations that apply to federal contractors. The first of which would be on affirmative action. The Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, or OFCCP, is the agency that is responsible for ensuring that employers doing business with the government, the federal government, comply with the laws and regulations requiring non-discrimination. This might sound very similar to the equal opportunity, but government contractors are required to take affirmative action to ensure that equal opportunities is provided in all aspects of employment. Again, sounding very similar, but contractors must show that their affirmative action, and so that is slightly different from EEO. To comply with this rule, all government contractors with 50 or more employees and $50,000 or more in government contracts are required to develop a written affirmative action plan, or an AAP. A written AAP helps the contractor identify and analyze potential problems in the participation and utilization of women, minorities, veterans, and individuals with disabilities in the workforce. This involves providing detailed information about your internal policies and procedures regarding all personnel transactions, and that includes things like recruitment, training, promotions, and compensation. Additionally, the written plans need to include statistical data about the contractor's workforce. So this can get pretty time-consuming and complex. In our experience, a lot of contractors are not aware of their requirements under affirmative action, and especially contractors with 50 or more employees are not aware that they're required to even have a written plan. And so most of these employers do not, or these contractors do not. And it is not until they receive a scheduling letter for an audit from OFCCP that they scramble to get something in place. And the cost of noncompliance could be very damaging to the contractor. The second regulation that I want to mention is the Service Contract Act, or SCA. A lot of acronyms regarding regulations, but the SCA requires contractors and subcontractors performing work on contracts in excess of $2,500 to pay service employees that are assigned on those contracts the local prevailing wage. And this includes benefits and overtime, as provided in a wage determination that's issued by the Department of Labor. Contractors must notify employees starting work on the SCA-covered contract of the wages due them under the wage and fringe benefits provisions of that wage determination. Again, most contractors are not aware that their contracts are even covered by the SCA until it's too late. If a contractor is audited for compliance with SCA and is found that they're not in compliance, there'll be back pay and payment for all the wages and fringe benefits for the entire class of employees found to be incorrectly paid. Violations of the SCA can result in contract terminations, liability for resulting costs to the government, withholding of contract payments to cover wage and fringe benefit underpayments, legal action to recover the underpayments, and debarment from future contracts. So we've seen contractors in the past that were found to be non-compliant, and they had to calculate what the correct amount would have been and make that payment. And sometimes this ended up being hundreds of thousands of dollars. So again, could be damaging. The third regulation is the Davis-Bacon Act. Very similar to the SCA. However, this regulation applies to federally funded or assisted contracts in excess of $2,000 for the construction, alteration, or repair of public buildings. So it's primarily for construction contracts. But like the SCA, the DBA, or the Davis-Bacon Act, requires contractors and their subcontractors to pay workers no less than the locally prevailing wages and fringe benefits. And the contractors and subcontractors are also subject to rules concerning allowable payroll deductions.
Kelly, this can be overwhelming to small businesses. What do you think is the biggest single issue that small contractors need to be aware of?
Yes, you're correct. It can be overwhelming. The biggest issue that small contractors need to be aware of with the Davis-Bacon Act is that they need to provide certified payroll to the contracting agency, meaning that for each pay, calculations must be presented that reflects wages in accordance with the prevailing rate of the wage determination, as well as any overtime pay for those employees, and the fringe benefit amount for each employee covered by that contract. So, yes, it can be very overwhelming. The last thing that I want to mention is DCAA. I think for the most part, a lot of contractors are aware of their obligations under the DCAA. However, I think it's also worth mentioning. DCAA works to prevent overcharges and overpayments on contracting expenditures. The agency performs contract audits to ensure dollars are spent on what's, quote, fair and reasonable contract prices. So the DCAA ensures contractors are adhering to the federal acquisition regulations, which apply to all federal contractors serving defense and civilian agencies and departments.
You know, Kelly, most of us associate DCAA with just adherence to approved accounting practices. Does the DCAA also look at HR compliance?
Great question, Shirley. Yes, you're correct. DCAA is associated with proper and approved accounting practices. However, in order to be compliant with DCAA and to be able to pass a potential audit, the contractor must have documented policies and procedures which are followed consistently around proper timekeeping and around their accounting practices. Therefore, it's important that all managers and employees are trained properly and that they fully understand their responsibilities when it comes to DCAA compliance. So therefore, that's where the HR component comes into DCAA. As I mentioned, there are a lot of compliance issues that apply to employers, but as a government contractor, it can get a little bit more complex as there are laws that are specifically for them as government contractors. While this webinar only covered, and I only mentioned a few of those and a brief overview of a few of those regulations, it is important that you are aware of not just what currently applies today, but what may apply as the regulations are always changing. One relatively new change that occurred in 2017 is that federal contractors must now provide their employees with up to 7 days of paid sick leave annually. And for those contractors that are also in states that have state-mandated sick leave, this can get very complicated. As it was mentioned, it is a long and complex process to do business with the government and to win the contracts. But knowing the compliance minefield and by having the necessary procedures and policies in place will assist in ensuring that you secure and keep those contracts.
This has been very informative, Kelly. You know, it underscores that the whole continuum of pursuing winning and keeping federal contracts and avoiding the associated growing pains requires discipline and diligence.
Agree.
So this ends the formal part of our presentation. We would like to take a few questions from the audience. So let's see here. We have questions coming in. The first one is, how many BD personnel should a small federal contractor have? I'll take this one. It depends upon what you mean by small, because small can be anywhere from $2 million to $30 million in annual revenues. But assuming we're talking about little tiny federal contractors, micro businesses, if you are a founder and CEO of a small business and trying to set up a BD function for the first time, what I normally recommend is that you have one person that is acting as a salesperson that's externally focused, and then one person that is internally focused that is supporting that person. And that internal person would be responsible for market analysis, so looking for upcoming opportunities and setting up meetings and those sorts of things, as well as marketing activities. You know, if any of you are interested, I have a couple of job descriptions that I'm willing to share with you, one for a federal salesperson and the other for this market intelligence analyst. And if you're interested in getting a copy of that, just shoot me an email at questions@scaletomarket.com, and I'm glad to share that with you. Okay, let's see, another question. Is there a resource that summarizes the compliance issues for small contractors? Kelly, you want to take that?
Sure. Unfortunately, no. There was not just one resource, because, as I mentioned, small contractors, government contractors, kind of live in both worlds. So there are those regulations that would apply to them as a regular employer, and then those that apply to them as a government contractor. However, the OFCCP, again, the agency that kind of monitors the non-discriminatory actions for government contractors, they do have a guide for small contractors. We can certainly get that link out to everyone as well. So if you're interested, just like the job descriptions that Shirley just offered up, if you're interested in getting that link, just let us know and we'll get that link out to you for that guide.
Thank you, Kelly. And you know what? I will just automatically send that out. It sounds like it's something that would be beneficial to everybody, since we're going to be sending out information, a link to the slides.
Sure.
So we'll do that for everyone. Okay, let's see. Another question is, what is the salary range for a market intelligence analyst? This depends upon where you are in the country. Salaries in the greater Washington area are going to be higher than they are probably in Des Moines. But this is what I can tell you. My observations are that the salary range is from around 45 to 65,000. It's in that range, and a lot depends upon the capabilities of the individual as well. If they are a really good research analyst and they can do marketing, well, they're worth their weight in gold. So keep that in mind. But generally, 45 to 65 is what I've seen around the country. Okay, let's see. Another question here is, what is the worst case scenario for non-compliance? Kelly, you want to take that?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, there are several different types of penalties, and it really depends on the regulations. So I mentioned, for instance, under SCA, violations of the SCA could result in contract terminations, would result in withholding of contract payments, back pay of all of the unpaid wages and the fringe benefits. But I guess if you're thinking about worst case scenario, it would be debarment from future contracts, and I would think that that's the one thing that most contractors want to avoid.
Absolutely. You definitely can't grow if you're barred from doing contracts with the federal government.
That is correct.
Okay, let's see. One last question. I was hoping I would get this question. What is your source for your quote regarding improving employee commitment? There's an article by Joe Folkman that I've been recommending to folks. Joe Folkman of Zinger Folkman. And I will send that link out to everyone as well. It's a great article and it's backed up by some research and is an easy read. So we'll send out the link to the OFCCP guide as well as the slides and then also this article by Joe Folkman. So time to wrap up. Kelly, thank you for your incredible insights and advice today.
Oh, thank you, Shirley. It's been my pleasure.
And thank you to all of you who have tuned in from around the country. Sign up for our Scale to Market's Growth Masters and Impact HR's newsletter for more complimentary, valuable information about growing your federal contracting business. Check out our websites for upcoming webinars and white papers and other information dealing with specific issues related to business development, human resources, and other government contracting matters. And, of course, don't hesitate to contact Kelly or me at any time about helping your business grow in the federal marketplace. Have a good day.